Hey, and glad you could join us. I'm Brandon. Let's talk games. I've had my Steam Deck for over a year now, and I've had the pleasure of playing through multiple incredible JRPGs on it that I don't see getting nearly as much attention as I would expect. Let's right that wrong today, as we go over 5 hidden gem JRPGs I played on Steam Deck. These games are in no particular order, and will all be spoiler-free. Because spoilers suck. Let's get into it. Number 1. Ast Libra Revision is a side-scrolling action RPG that really caught me off guard. I remember seeing the trailer and being curious about it, but I was having a hard time deciding if it was the kind of thing I'd actually enjoy playing. I tried the demo and had a reasonably good time, but the combat didn't really click with me in those few hours. I ended up setting it aside for several months while I worked my way through other JRPGs, but as soon as I had a moment, I decided to take the plunge, and I am so happy I did. This might be a recurring theme in this video. Ast Libra has stunning aesthetics and a great soundtrack, giving it a distinct atmosphere that I fell in love with. The combat took some time for me to get accustomed to, but once I understood just how fast-paced it really was, I started zooming about the place, swinging my weapons, and blasting enemies with abandon. As you level up, move through the skill tree, and learn new techniques by mastering equipment, the combat evolves, and you get all these different ways you can approach fights. I found myself mashing the buttons so hard sometimes that my thumbs would start to overheat. But I was having such a good time, I couldn't put it down. I wouldn't expect a game like this to have much in the way of a story, but it's actually a crucial part of the experience, and it is by no means short. My playthrough took me over 60 hours. The whole time, the story just keeps evolving. It keeps you on your toes the whole way through, and I loved it. Fair warning, the game does rely on some slightly fan-servicey tropes here and there that really surprised me, but I would consider them to be fairly mild overall. I imagine most people will still be able to enjoy the game, but now you are informed. The craziest thing about Ast Libra is that it was made by one guy over the course of about 15 years. Considering that it has overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam, I'd say the work was well worth it. Based on the number of reviews it has, it might even be working its way out of hidden gem territory. I'll be cheering for you, Ast Libra. Number 2. Shifting gears, this next one is from a major JRPG developer, but for some reason it barely gets any attention. It's Xanadu Next from Nihon Falcom, the same developer behind the Trail series and the East series. If I had to sum it up in simple terms, I'd say it's an isometric action RPG that perfectly evokes the feeling of the PS2 era. It has an intriguing story with lots of mystery to keep you wondering how the world got to be this way, and it largely stays out of your way so that you can focus on the meat of the game, the exploration and combat. Xanadu Next is a shorter one, clocking in at roughly 20 to 30 hours, and that feels just right for it. You have plenty of time to get acquainted with its mechanics and try out different combinations of skills. By the time it's over, it's a very satisfying package. I wish more games these days would learn from Xanadu Next. Exploration sits at the heart of the experience, and that's perfect for me. I love looking into all the nooks and crannies, trying to find goodies. Xanadu Next gives you plenty to explore and plenty of rewards for your efforts. Combat keeps things fairly simple and straightforward, and I appreciate that. You have your regular attack, skills with limited uses, passive skills, and items. That's pretty much it. As you explore, you'll find areas that are just out of reach, and you'll have to keep these places in mind for when you find an item that gives you the necessary ability to reach them. Yeah, it has a little Metroidvania DNA in it, and I freaking love it. I don't play a ton of Metroidvanias, but I have loved most of the ones I have, so I was entirely down for spicing up the exploration like this. The first thing you'll probably notice when you look at the store page on Steam is that Xanadu Next is actually not supported on Steam Deck. But when I saw it on a deep sale, I took a shot, and it ended up working almost perfectly. The only issue I had was with the controls, which are, non-standard, let's say. It took some time, but I got used to them and had a great time with it. If you're alright with a game that might require a tiny bit of effort to get comfortable with, Xanadu Next is the definition of a hidden gem. Number 3. I may or may not be cheating with this one, but it's only because I don't actually know for sure where the developer of Lunacid is from. I'm including it because it is heavily inspired by the King's Field series. At the very least, close enough. Lunacid is a first-person dungeon crawler with a beautiful aesthetic reminiscent of PS1 and PS2 games. Even the gameplay has a certain clunkiness to it that makes it feel like you're playing something from that era. And that's not a knock on it. Based on what I've seen of the King's Field games, it nails what it's going for. It's really very impressive. The story is largely told through item descriptions and environmental cues, much like you would see in a Souls-like, and the world is filled with them. If it hits right for you, you'll have lots to dig into here. Remember that clunkiness I mentioned? It's the combat mainly. That's how it was in the games that inspired Lunacid, so I don't fault it for it. If anything, I'm grateful that it allowed me to have my very first King's Field-like experience. I've been curious about them for years, and now I feel like I've gotten a good taste of what they're all about. I think first playthroughs probably run less than 20 hours, but there's so much to discover in it that you could easily do multiple playthroughs with different builds and keep having a great time with it. It's a little hard to talk about Lunacid because so much of the joy I found in it came from the discoveries I made myself. I went in pretty blind, having only seen a trailer and some screenshots, and I am so glad I did. Eventually I got lost and had to look some stuff up, but I was pretty far into the game at that point, and it was still a great time. If you're looking for something a little unusual, look no further than this hidden gem. Number 4. Undernaut's Labyrinth of Yomi is a dungeon crawler for people who prefer a darker, more gruesome setting, with intricate and sometimes grotesque monster designs. The first time I saw footage of this one, I knew I was going to end up playing it, and I have zero regrets. So few games have an aesthetic like this, and it clicked with me immediately. Right out of the gate, this game basically screams at you that you're in for a dark time. If you aren't comfortable with more gruesome content, rather, if you don't enjoy it, maybe look elsewhere. Undernauts pulls very few punches, and that's one of the reasons I enjoyed it so much. It might be the first dungeon crawler I had played in close to 10 years, but it was a great way to get back in touch with the genre. I always love customizing my party in games like this, choosing their classes, their skills, their equipment. It feels like you've really accomplished something when you figure out a team composition that works well. The dark theme is not purely aesthetic. If you don't take the time to think through your setup and figure out how you want to take advantage of the game's different mechanics, you will see your team get slaughtered. It's not so bad at the start, of course, but by the time I hit credits, I had fought my fair share of nail-biting battles, even with a decent bit of grinding. This one makes you work for credits. If you're into the aesthetic and you enjoy a little bit of grinding to make your perfect party, Undernaut's Labyrinth of Yomi is absolutely a hidden gem worth checking out. Number 5. Last and certainly not least, Wizardry: Labyrinth of Lost Souls. Originally released for the PS3 back in 2011 in North America, I actually tried the demo of the 2009 Japanese version very briefly. I was entirely unfamiliar with the dungeon crawler genre at that time, and I wish I'd stuck with it. Well, no matter. I got back to it eventually. Of all the games on this list, this one is definitely the lightest on story. Some mechanics lean pretty heavily toward the esoteric side of things, and while I did give it my best shot to get going with it without looking anything up, I did give in after probably 10 hours or so, and I'm actually happy I did. The game explains very little. I had a great time experimenting with it, trying to see if I could figure it all out, and I did get a good grasp on a decent amount of it. But it's not a short game, and I think I would have enjoyed it less had I not looked up how some of the mechanics function. Setting aside the opaque nature of the game, I really enjoyed the anime aesthetic it uses. I think that might have made it easier for me to get through the adjustment period while I came to grips with everything. I've seen longtime fans of the series online who are unhappy with the anime style, but for me, it works great. Just like with Undernauts, figuring out the team composition that worked for me was a lot of fun, and I was always excited to see new skills unlock. They're few and far between, but some can completely shift how you approach fights. That glimmer of hope that a new skill might make surviving easier, that's a good feeling. Because it often does feel like you're fighting to survive. You go into a dungeon, you explore, you fight, and you make sure that you can get back out in one piece. Even with the ability to save anywhere, it is tense. Losing even a single party member can wreck your chances sometimes. Wizardry Labyrinth of Lost Souls is an older game now, with some mechanics that the series has been known for since the 1980s. I don't expect everyone to agree with me here, but I had a great time with it, and I consider it to be a hidden gem. What hidden gems have you played on Steam Deck? Let me know in the comments. Now for my favorite cherry on top. You can find all of these games for very reasonable prices. If you're on a budget, you could probably grab a few of them at once during a sale. I hope I was able to introduce you to at least one game here that you might enjoy. We're constantly hammered with advertisements for games with bigger budgets, so I wanted to bring some attention to games that weren't able to afford that kind of publicity. There's a lot out there, and as much as I love the bigger budget titles, I also love these, and I hope you will too. Remember to subscribe for more, and to give the video a like to tell the world there's value here. Now go find some fun. Peace.